Hi, everybody. It's great to be here tonight. This is one of my favorite classes to teach. Hi, Lee. And I'm so excited that you're here. I love talking about point of view, and I'm working on hi, Morgan. Just checking in and saying hi. I'm so glad you all are here. I'm actually working on a novel right now, and was really struggling. Like, my first book didn't really have any questions about how I was going to handle point of view. And then with this second book, I got halfway through and I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not using a point of view that's like super effective. So, and I think part of like just my obsession and my like good fortune in getting to teach this class for the Writers League so many times had me reflecting on that. So I'm really excited to work with you. Hi, Penny. Whoa, sorry. That's not supposed to happen. Really excited to talk with you and work with you all tonight. Let's get started. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint for the course. Okay. So tonight we're talking about playing with point of view. Whose story is it anyway? And I wanted to give you an opportunity to review what the class goals are. So we're going to talk about each available point of view that there is. First, beginning with talking about the first person point of view, then looking at second person point of view, which is less used and less common, but really, really fun and could be something that you want to explore. We are going to discuss and then we'll talk about third person limited and third person omniscient, the differences between those and why you might apply those to your fiction. We are going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each point of view, practice writing in each point of view tonight, opportunity for questions and sharing throughout. And my hope is that you're going to leave the class with a better understanding of what's going to work for the work that you're currently working on. And also, oftentimes I have students who leave this class with some new ideas for a new piece of work. So it's very exciting to keep that in mind too. So I want to start by talking about, and I'm so sorry, I'm like on multiple devices right now, so I'm trying to pull up my notes. Okay, there we go. So I want to first talk about the first person point of view and sort of get you to be thinking about why you might use that point of view. So I think a big question to ask when you're sitting down to write is the experience that you want for your reader to have, and to be able to acknowledge and see that whatever point of view you use, there's the impact that's going to have on you as the writer and how you're telling the story, but it's really like, how is the reader going to receive this story? So when you're thinking about the novel that you're writing, do you want your readers to witness this story, or do you want them to experience it? And if you want the reader to experience the story, then the first person point of view could be the best choice for you. And we can think about why, right? So if it's the third person, and we'll talk about second person is kind of like weird when we think about this, but when we think about the third person point of view, there's always it's an outside looking in, right? So it's sort of, there are things that it loses something when it comes to intimacy, and it makes up for some things also in that loss of intimacy. But if you're really wanting that reader to very closely experience the story, then the first person point of view is really a good choice. That's when it comes to the reader. When it comes to the writer, do you enjoy studying your characters closely? I was just talking with some friends who had been to AWP, which is the big writing conference out in Portland. Oh, it was in Portland this year, and they were talking about a panel that they went to about reading the tarot of your characters, right? Do you want to do like a Myers-Briggs personality test on your characters? Like, do you want to like draw out their grocery list? If you want to know them really, really intimately, and you want to create and see the world from one character's point of view, then I think the first person is going to be right for you also. I want to see, I'm jumping into chat just to see, is there any questions at all right now? Is like thinking about those two, like, you know, if you want your readers, I keep thinking students, I teach all the time. So if you want your readers to experience the story, I want you to see that the first person point of view is a good place to start. And if you as a writer are really interested in character study, then I want you to see that this is a good point of view for you. Any questions right now? I'm going to move on. Oops. Okay. So what is the first person point of view? So at this very basic level, the first person is when we use the pronoun I. So when the story is told by one character. And I pulled this example from To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee as just to demonstrate, but I know that any of us who took high school English would know that the first person point of view is I. But the novel is narrated by Scout. And here's a line from the book. It was times like these when I thought my father, who hated guns and had never been to any wars, was the bravest man who ever lived. And the reason why I pulled this to illustrate and exemplify the first person point of view is that what you get here is, is the I, right? You get the thoughts of Scout, right? So it's very, very, very closely related to her thoughts and feelings. It's not being filtered through another party. I want to just, can you all just check in and let me know that everything's going okay for you? Because I just got a note that says like that I had an unstable internet connection, and I want to be sure that that's not true for you, that everything is like going okay. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. Morgan, is it better now? Because it could also be me. Okay. I'm broadcasting live from the Writers League office because I have young children in my house, and so I cannot broadcast there. So thank you. And hi to those of you who have jumped in. I'm so glad that you're here. Okay, back to the first person. So I'm sorry, I was distracted for a bit, worried that I was losing you. So I want you to see that when this is an example of the first person point of view, we get Scout's thoughts immediately. And we know that they're not filtered or connected to, you know, in any way being sullied by somebody else. Oh, I see that. Okay, thanks. I was just checking in the chat. Thank you, Haley. Okay, so let's talk about why you would use the first person point of view. So it provides intimacy for the writer and the reader, right? So it gives you the opportunity as the writer to just be in one person's head. And I think about, actually, I've never thought about this metaphor before, but I think about like method acting, which is not something I've ever done. But I still think about how, like, you know, the great actors and actresses of our time will really, like, in so many ways, like, become these people that they're portraying. And I'm not advocating that, you know, you necessarily become your character. But I can see, and I have had this experience, maybe some of you have had this experience, where if you are especially using the first person point of view, that you will have that set, like you will see the world through their eyes, right? That you'll start thinking like, oh, that's just the kind of thing that, you know, Marcy would say. That's just like Marcy, you know, I mean, just things that like as you're walking through and living through this life, like you're going to start seeing things through your character's eyes when you're not writing, right? And some of us will get great joy from that experience and really enjoy that process. And so you're filtering the story through that one person. And this is also how we live, right? I mean, I was to narrate my day to you, which would not be that excited, but it's like I woke up, I had my coffee, I made breakfast for my kids. It's like how we tell stories so often is through the first person point of view. And so I think that it can feel very natural for us to sit down and write in that point of view. Okay, so, and as the reader, there's this real opportunity for connection and for that relationship between the reader and character to grow and feel like a friendship. And I was just thinking about a collection of stories I read, just talking, and a collection that I did not care for. And I won't name the collection. It's not, not necessarily fair to that writer because it's all subjective, but I was saying, so many of the characters were really unlikable. And as I was telling a friend this, I was like, not that your characters in fiction have to be likable, but in this particular collection, the characters were cruel. And I did not want to spend like page after page with them, right? I did not have that sense that I wasn't on this journey with them. I wasn't forging some kind of friendship or relationship or learning something from them to reflect back on me. And I like this excerpt from The Catcher in the Rye, because I feel like it's this kind of meta excerpt of what I'm talking about. I think it's like early in the novel, Holden Caulfield says, "What really knocks me out is a book that when you're all done reading it, you wish the author that wrote it was a terrific friend of yours and you could call him up on the phone whenever you feel like it." That doesn't happen much though. But I would say that it happens when you use the first person more than not, right? Because as the reader, you're sort of like seeing that character as being some kind of embodiment or a dimension of the writer, right? And that closeness can feel really, really good. Okay. Another reason to use the first person point of view is I say it allows for a true unfolding of a story. So the first person narrator can withhold certain information and create suspense, right? So as the reader, you are experiencing, that's the idea, right? Like you're experiencing the story as the narrator is experiencing it, and whatever they know, you're going to know, right? They're not necessarily, I can see some examples where maybe you have this first person narrator who's withholding information, but it still feels like the reader, it's not the reader would be in the know. Okay. I just want to check in and see if there are any questions so far. Anybody have any questions? So far we've covered that the first person point of view uses I. It's a point of view to use when you want to create intimacy between the reader and the work. It's an opportunity for you to do really in-depth character study. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving, but I'm just, again, I'm like getting comfortable with this platform and wanting to check in with chat when I can. Okay. So I was also like certain genres, I was thinking that certain genres tend to be first person friendly, I say. Particularly, I think about young adult novels, and I don't believe that Catcher in the Rye was marketed
or that maybe there even was much of a young adult genre when Salinger wrote Catcher in the Rye. But I do think that there's something about like a teenage reader and a teenage narrator. There's that like almost like, it's like they're puppies, like just trying to know one another, crawling all over each other. So there's this intimacy that exists there. I'm going to check in on this chat message. Can first person, this is such a great question, Gogi. And I'm so excited. I know Gogi's work. I know she's been working on this. Are you still working on the novel, the California novel? You can tell me. So not right now. So you can put that on pause. Okay. So I think, and maybe there may be somebody who's read it more recently than I have, but if you're familiar with the book Fates and Furies by, her name is escaping me because that is my life right now, Fates and Furies. Lauren Groff is the writer. I'm pretty sure that her book, Fates and Furies, it's told in two parts. From the husband's point of view is the first half, he is Fates. And from the wife's point of view, it's Furies.
but it's divided like right down the middle. Like it's his version of a marriage and their life together, and then her version. And I'm pretty sure that they use first person. So I guess Gogi, like when Gogi's talking about dual POV, so she's talking about dual points of view, right? So can you have two characters using I can see how, and when we talk about third person point of view, we're going to talk about how the alternating points of view has become very, I don't know, popular is not the right word, but we see a lot of work, contemporary work, that has multiple characters, chapter to chapter, sharing their point of view from the third person. I can see that if you did that in the first person, right? If it was like chapter to chapter with an I point of view, with a first person point of view, I believe that could get a little confusing for the reader. I wouldn't say that you can't do it, but I think why it works or how it could work is if there's like part one and part two, and they're very clearly told from each of their points of view. And in fact, actually, we're going to talk about Gone Girl. And I think, okay, when we talk about Gone Girl, we'll see how they do that with Nick and Girl, because that's husband and wife also, same story, different points of view. Does that help, Gogi? Okay, that's such a good question. And I want to come up with more and more examples. And, you know, as people are really the thing that's really fun about this workshop for me is like the point of view is really getting played with quite a bit more and more. So I think as more examples of how to do it and how to do it successfully, that aren't so traditional, that we haven't seen before, the more that we as writers can draw from and be like, oh, so-and-so did it. Here's how they worked out that problem. I can do that too. Okay. Here are some disadvantages to the first person point of view. So you could end up writing a story that's too close to you. And I want to offer an example. So I did my MFA at Texas State and wrote my thesis. Prior to going to graduate school, I was a high school English teacher in Houston. I wrote a novel when I was in graduate school that was from the first person point of view of a young teacher living and working in Houston who had like sort of a fraught relationship with her mother and sister. And all of that was like very much, I was drawing off of experience, but I was really trying to like, what I really wanted to write, I wanted to write a novel that was set in Houston, and I wanted to write a novel that was set in a high school. What I wrote was this like very thinly veiled autobiographical woman in her early 20s trying to figure out the world, right? And it was like the further that I tried to distance the novel from like what was happening with me, just the worse things got. It wasn't, I mean, it was a great exercise, not just in what not to do, but just to make me realize, oh, this isn't really the book that I want to write. That if I want to write about like what it was like to come of age in my 20s and have like a fraught relationship with my mother and my sister, then perhaps I should be writing essays about that time in my life, right? I should be writing nonfiction, creative nonfiction about that time. The novel that I have that's currently being represented by an agent and is being sent out to editors right now is a novel that's set in Houston at a Houston high school, and it has a first person, it does not have a first person. It has a first year teacher. It has multiple points of view. It's all told in the third person. And I found that by using the third person, I was very much able to distance myself from that story, even though I was writing about a place and a character that I did know. I didn't feel like I was locked into some kind of truths. I have to tell these truths. I very much felt like, no, this is a fictional story about a place I know well. The novel that I'm working on right now, because the story, it's set in Austin, but the main character is so wildly different from me, and it's sort of a satirical, in some ways it's sort of a satire on multiple things about real estate and motherhood, and some things I know some things about, some things I don't know anything about. Using the first person point of view feels really, really good because I feel like I've created this character. It's clearly a character. It is not me. I hope that makes sense. So that if you do choose to write the first person point of view, from the first person point of view, I think it's worth asking yourself, am I telling a story that's really, really close to me and my experience? And if I am, do I want to maybe be writing essays or think about a memoir? Or do I want to put this in a third person point of view and make some real significant changes to that character so that the story feels fictional? And I see that mostly because I think the work is often better, because when we're writing a truth, we don't want to betray the truth, right? So if we're like writing truth that's veiled as fiction, like it just, I don't know, I want to hear in the comments in a second or from chat, like what you all think about that point. But that is an issue that I can see happening with the first person point of view. Maintaining consistency of voice can be difficult. So you really, it goes into that intimacy of knowing your first person, knowing who your character is. It's not, your character will go on a journeys, they will likely change and grow. But you need to sort of, there's probably, as you're drafting, you're probably going to be doing a lot of rereading or note taking before you can move forward, because you don't want to send the character too far out of character. You don't want the voice to change, right? Like, so that consistency is really, can be hard, and is something you need to be more mindful of, I think, when you're writing from the first person point of view. Would she really say that? How would she or he say it? Would they say it like that? And then also questions of reliability can come into play. So with a book like Gone Girl, so we're going to talk about that. So it's a first person narrative, Gogi, where it's like, it's two characters, it's a dual POV. And it's part of the appeal of that book, I think, because if you're familiar with the book, which is so much, in my mind, a lot better than the film, that's often true, not always, but often. Nick, you know, that's the question that Gillian Flynn is asking the reader, like, to consider, like, who are you believing here, right? Is Nick telling the truth? Is Amy crazy? But if questions of reliability are not a part of what the book is trying to do, like if it's not a mystery, or if we're not trying to get to the bottom of something, it can, not only can the narrative end up falling short, but a reader can feel cheated, and maybe like they were hoodwinked, and then they could feel resentful, you know? And so, yeah, so I guess that goes too with like with the, let me go, I said something, right. So when I said it allows for true unfolding of the story, right? So what a stinker of a narrator your narrator would be if they were sharing the story in a certain way, and then like 3/4 of the way in, they suddenly drop a bomb that they were holding from the reader, like for no reason than to just hold it, right? As a reader, you might just throw the book on the floor and be like, I'm done. That's not fair. Like, what's happening? I'm looking at this chat. Yeah, right, Gogi. Agreed. The unreliable narrator is going to like anger the reader. Absolutely. And I think that we need to know that like when we sit down to write, that, you know, if we're here tonight at a Writers League of Texas webinar, like we're probably hoping for an audience at some point. And our audience is not, they're not going to think we're cute or clever if we do that, sort of, if we hoodwink them. Yeah. Okay, so the disadvantages. Okay, so I want us to just think about what narrative tension means. So when you're writing from the first person point of view, most of the tension is going to be external. So I opened the door, I couldn't believe what I saw, more than internal. Which is not to say that you're not going to like, it's not that you're not going to share the first person points of view, like their struggles. But it is to say that like that can't be Michael. Some of you might know my husband, Michael Noll. We talked years ago about how it seemed like there was this rash of books that had come out by young writers in their early 20s, and they were getting a lot of press, and they were, you know, really popular. And when we looked at them, like I was like, I just feel like, how many books do we need about like young people walking around New York City, like thinking, you know? And for me, like, I get that maybe that is that's a genre within a genre, I guess, like walking around thinking. But it doesn't, I don't know, like it doesn't do it for me. Like that can't be the narrative tension. Like I need to feel like there's something more at stake than just like the character's thoughts. And I think if you're writing from the first person point of view, that's something to really consider. Okay, so I am going to do my best to pull up the pages from Gatsby, but I think that they were sent to you also. And so first let me ask, before we move on and look at the published example, are there any other thoughts about the first person point of view before we look at these examples together? I'm gonna take a sip of we call this tickle water in my house, sparkling water. I have small children, call it tickle water. Okay, let's look at those Gatsby pages, and I am going to do, let me try, whoops, no, I don't want to do that, but I have to, okay. Oh, sorry, okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I asked you to look at or I printed off or had available to you, was sent to you the first 3 pages from Gatsby, right? And the first question I asked, go back to the PowerPoint so I can refresh my own. Right, so the 3 questions: what does Fitzgerald accomplish by using the first person point of view to open the novel? So can I ask for some responses to that question? As the writer, what does he accomplish by using Nick as the first person narrator in this novel? Any thoughts about that? We see the lens of Nick, and that the story that unfolds is prejudiced by his views. I love that, right? And Morgan, yes, he shares his personal thoughts and feelings. So one of my favorite lines from this section is, oh gosh, let me see. This line: no, Gatsby turned out all right at the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. And I think so, to Gogi's point, and I'll take another look, get back into chat. Okay, so Gogi's point of like, we see this is Nick's lens, the story is unfolding, it's from his perspective, and according to him, it's what preyed on Gatsby that got him at the end. It also foreshadows, right, a little bit of the novel. Like you get a sense very early on, like, oh, this is not, the Great Gatsby is going to fall, right? We find that out very early on, that this story is dramatic and not necessarily full of puppies and rainbows, right? The other, if you're familiar with the book, I think I was curious about what if the book had been told from Gatsby's point of view? So I'm sort of curious if you know the story or if you remember it, it's like, And even if not, like, we don't all have to like relive our high school trauma if, if it was traumatic, but even if not, like Gatsby his story is so central. I mean, the book is titled The Great Gatsby, right? His story is so central. So what advantages or disadvantages are there of having this ancillary character tell the story of like what's essentially your main character? Any thoughts about that? Advantages and disadvantages to that process? Right. Yes, I love that. And so you can think, you can think about right, both of these things. So you can think about a lot of mystique would be lost. Gatsby would lose the fascination heaped on him by others. And I think that's too, like, when Nick says, like, it's what preyed on Gatsby, which others' expectations were part of, I think, what preyed on him. But so if you have this character who is somewhat of an enigma, I think it's interesting to have a first-person narrator telling their story. And it is Nick's story as well. We need him there, but he is like, he's us. Like, he's the witness of this other man's story, which I think is really interesting. And I think those opposing views to an experience, like Nick gets carried along for the ride a lot of the time with Gatsby, is sort of like, in some ways early on, sort of, I don't want to say an unwilling participant, but he's a hesitant sidekick, maybe, right? And so that could be when you're thinking about your work in progress, like, I'm thinking if you're stuck, like that could be, there could be an opportunity in your work to do something like that. Also, Gatsby is a liar. And so, so I think that there's something, if you're thinking about like work that you're doing and you have a character whose story is central, right? Story is really important, that they are told, but they're not reliable, right? That they're myth makers, they're making their own story, then having someone else tell their story can be really impactful. Any other thoughts about that section? I think the last question I asked, let me take a look. How does the first person point of view create the tension? And I think one way is that, like, that line of like, it's what preyed on Gatsby. Let me take another look with you. How does it, yeah, and even the beginning, like those beginning lines, in my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice. And so there's some tension there that I like what Morgan said about opposing, I'm going to go back to what Morgan said, opposing views to an experience. I think that Nick sets that up very early when he shares that advice from his father, right? That not everybody has had the advantages that you've had. And then we find out that, like, Nick is entering this world and meeting this person who is very different from him, and he doesn't even yet know all of the ways. So as a reader, it's almost the reader's being chastised. Like, when you feel like criticizing anyone, reader, like Gatsby, remember that they're not like you. Yeah. Okay. We don't look at that yet. Okay. Any other thoughts about that? Okay. Oops. Hi. Let's move on to the next piece. Okay. On Gone Girl. So I mentioned I love using this book as an example for point of view, because I think Gillian Flynn really does this incredible job of making the reader wonder throughout how they're supposed to be feeling. But for me, it never felt gimmicky, or I didn't feel like I was being tricked or hoodwinked, or, like, that Gogi mentions, like, you know, I didn't feel like either Nick or Amy were unreliable. I felt like I was in it. I was in on it to figure out whose truth and whose story felt, as the stories unfolded, who felt more authentic to me. So let me pull that up somehow. Okay, sorry. Oops. Okay. If you would all give me 1 second to pull that up. I'm so sorry. Okay. Share. Okay. Are you all seeing that now? Are you seeing the... Yes. Okay. Thanks, Morgan. Okay. So, perfect. Thank you. And thank you for any patience that you're needing to afford me because of this, like I said, this platform. I had it and then I didn't have it and now here we are. Okay. So, what is that first line? So this is the very beginning of Gone Girl. And when you see that first line, when I think of my wife, I always think of her head. What does that set up for you as a reader? Right. Gogi, I love that I think Flynn gets away with this because she's always clear on who's telling the story and how the story is unfolding, and clear that these are two people with totally different points of view on their marriage and what happened. And then really it implicates the reader at a certain point about whose side they're going to pick and who they're going to not just believe, but who they're going to side with, really. Because the facts are the facts. I mean, eventually Amy's story comes into play and the story is what it is, but that's after we've already probably made a lot of assumptions about the other character. But she's never done it in a way, it is very clever, and as a reader you appreciate it. She's never done it in a tricky way. She's just like, I presented this first, and now I'm giving you her point of view. Let me see. Okay. And I think if you notice the word choice, how would you set the tone? So let me, oh my gosh, why did that just go away? Okay, there we go. I guess I'm curious, like what those first, like when she writes of Nick, like a child, I picture opening her skull, unspooling her brain and sifting through it, trying to catch and pin down her thoughts. What are you thinking? Who are you? What have we done to each other? What we do? Like, what is the tone that Nick's first person point of view in the very beginning pages is establishing for the reader? Because I'm curious about your thoughts there. Really ominous, right? Really, like really dark. But as the story unfolds, it's less, I mean, it's emotionally dark, but doesn't necessarily have that, we're not concerned. It changes, it shifts, is what I'll say. And I think Flynn is able to do that with the point of view. Okay, trying to do, somehow I've lost my, oh my gosh. Sorry, y'all. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So I want to give you the opportunity to spend some time writing from the first person point of view. And I like to do this with all of my classes. Like after, we'll have 3 separate 10-minute writing exercises. It's like after we've discussed each point of view, I like to give everybody the opportunity to play around with that point of view. So you may, if you have a work in progress that's working with the first person point of view, or maybe that's not, you might spend some time looking over your pages, or maybe writing some new pages, trying on the first person point of view if that feels right, or maybe working from a place now that we've done a little bit of more talking about what the first person point of view can do. Or you could do a writing exercise where you choose a narrator. And I came up with 4 that I think are pretty fun. One, a 16-year-old girl who works at a Dairy Queen, a 32-year-old mail carrier who's never been on a date, a 40-year-old divorced male with 2 children, ages 6 and 8, who recently lost his job, a 65-year-old woman who lives alone. And then I sort of in a choose your own adventure fashion, like have 4 first sentences that you might use. The last time I saw her, she, from the back of the truck, I, on the night of the full moon, we, the one thing I know for sure. So it's you're choosing a narrator, choosing that first sentence, and just writing for approximately 10 minutes, the opening of a scene with this narrator using the first person point of view, starting that sentence. What questions do you have? Are you game? Are you ready to maybe try a little writing? So it's 7:14 now, so that would mean at about 7:25, we'll come back together. And I always welcome people to share. So maybe, if just be thinking about that. I won't call on anyone. We're not, I mentioned high school trauma. We're not going to do that. But in about 10 minutes or so, if there's anybody who wants to share, just be prepared to like copy and paste your work into the chat, and then we'll look at it together. Where do we write this? Great. Pat, so it's up to you. So if you want to open up a Word document on your computer and type it there, that's great, especially if you want to share, because then you can copy and paste. If you're a pen and paper kind of person and just want to write on your own, not as conducive to sharing for us, but fun for you nonetheless. Does that answer your question, Pat? So either on your own computer, just open up a Word document and write, or cool, or write on your own. Okay. I am going to just mute my camera just so I don't, just so you don't see or hear me for the next 10 minutes, but I'll jump back in, like I said, a little bit before 7:25 and check and see how things are going, but I'll leave this slide up for sure. Okay, see you back in a little bit. Hey everyone. So if you are still writing, go ahead and try to find a place where you could wrap things up, just kind of end for now. And if there's anybody who would love to share, would you just let us know in the comments and then copy and paste your work and we can talk a little bit about it? Is there anybody up for that? Morgan, I see you. Thank you so much. It's very brave, to do this. Okay, I'm going to read. We'll all read together and then talk about some of the things that we noticed that are really working with the first person point of view here. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, I just read the line. Online shopping is not my forte, but I could find the proper, but if I could find the proper hatchet, I love that. Like, it's such a fun juxtaposition because I'm like, I'm not expecting that line. And so that's really fun. Love it. Oh my gosh, this is such a fun beginning. Morgan, is this something that you've been working on, or is this something that you decided to start tonight? I love it. Because I'm curious too, like, yeah. Let me see. Love it. Thanks, Morgan. So Pat, I'm going to talk about yours in just a second. I just want to ask Morgan a quick question. So, so has the short story that you're writing that you worked on just now, has it always been from the first person point of view? And then I'm also curious, like, was there anything that we talked about that you felt was helpful when you were writing these lines? And if nothing comes to mind, don't worry. I'm just curious. Gogi, I just glanced at your first line and I had to chuckle to myself. Morgan, I just changed the first person for this class. I'm still playing with POV for various stories. That's awesome. So that's so great, Morgan. And not having seen the other version, which I'm assuming is probably third person, I like this, not having seen the earlier version, which I think is probably just as good, but I'll tell you what I get from this, from it being first person. There's this element of surprise, and that feels like, again, like I use the word intimate, I'm not just reusing it because it's in my notes, but like, it's just like I am immediately sitting with this person on that mesh rolling chair, and I'm like, laughing when I see the line, online shopping is not my forte, and I'm like in her or his or her brain right there. Whereas like I'm thinking the difference would be like Morgan plopped down on the mesh rolling chair, her hands quickly planted on the keyboard. She started her search. Online shopping is not her forte, like was not her forte. Like that, there's this distance, which is not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing at all. Yeah, Pat, I'm gonna look at yours in a second, for sure. Anyway, Morgan, I just wanted to share that with you, that like that's what I'm getting out of the first person. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh, that's like not that I appreciate that like you just were able to apply something immediately to your work. Okay, I want to look at Pat's. Let's transition and look at Pat's sentences. The one thing I know for sure, I just love that opening line. I don't know if anybody remembers, like NPR used to they had a series called like The One Thing I Know for Sure, I think, and people were submitting personal essays. So I just think it's a fun first line anyway. The one thing I know for sure, the children in the front yard playing slip and slide do not even see me. Ooh, that is creepy and awesome. I watched the boy not more than 4 or 5 slide forward, hands in front, water spraying in the yard. Children would be nice to have, but then that would disappoint mother. Also creepy. I can never leave her. I tried once. Oh my gosh, like I'm so into this story. My mind still sees her unblinking gaze of disbelief. I promise never to try again. I'll just put the mail in the box and move on. Oh my God. Oh my God, Pat, that's such a fun opening. Whoa. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so I really want you to write this story. And I really like the one thing I know for sure. Like I like this, like the voice. Now I am thinking of my mailman or mail person as a voyeur. But I didn't know, like, it took me to the very end of reading this to see that that's who this character was. And I 100% love it. And I love the details about the mother, and I love the details like about the kids, and I love it. I thank you. Gogi, the one thing I know for sure is those aren't her real boobs. It's amazing. She isn't fooling anyone, not the Jackson Cares or any of the guys at school. I saw them drooling like dogs last night at the Dairy Queen as I rushed back and forth, filling Tiffy's and the other 3 cheerleaders double dip cones. Jackson suddenly had to rush up to get napkins. Here, Tiffy, don't want to mess up your top, Tiffy. Pff, made me sick. Like boobs are the only things that matter. Who am I kidding? It's all they see right now. Yes, I love this character so much. Love her. Love too. Like I want you to think about how the fact that like a high school girl has fake boobs, like how that sets the story in a specific time and place, sort of, or like tells us, is a very specific detail, right? Might be something that we'd see like in a Tony suburb of like Dallas or Houston, maybe not so much in Kyle. Just thinking about Kyle because there's a Dairy Queen that I pass every day driving down to Texas State that's in Kyle, right? But I love that. And Gogi, and again, everyone in the chat, like I know Gogi's work because I've read it. I really think you have a voice for young adult work. I know that your first novel wasn't necessarily like, that wasn't the genre that you necessarily had placed it in, but like 100% like teenage girls and boys are going to totally get these opening lines. So awesome. I'm going to look at Lee's. Let's look at Lee's beginning, and then we're going to talk about the second person. Okay. Second person point of view, not second person here. Okay. Lee, from the cab of the truck, I passed home after home filled with smiling families, kids running and playing up and down the street, laughter and loud screams of joy and hurt feelings and simple childhood squabbles. I yearn to be, I know you meant yearn. I yearn to be a part of that. I want to find the woman of my dreams, one who will want me and complete me. Just thinking of her makes my palms sweaty, my heart race. I noticed the all too familiar lump in my throat as well. Oh, this poor person. I haven't been on a date, never, not a real one. I was part of a group date a couple of times in high school, but we were a bunch of nerdy brain types, could only attract the other nerdy brain types from our class. So the group dates were more or less like going out with your first or second cousins. That's so good. Enough to have fun and laugh and enjoy ourselves, but nothing behind that. Beyond that. That's so, so good. Oh my gosh. So, and there's also like, I mean, there's a little bit of a voyeur bit to Lee's as well, but like totally different from Pat's, right? Like, just like someone watching and yearning and hopeful, but for something totally different. And we feel it. I mean, I really feel it because of the first person point of view, very much. I think like all these examples are so good at illustrating how the first person point of view really like shifts us into like a character's mindset, and how like I was able to go from like to somebody buying a hatchet to somebody to a postmaster to somebody working at Dairy Queen. Yes, I love how strong and yet different the same prompts express, totally. And I know this, I'm pretty sure this PowerPoint is available to you, like that you have access to this. I would tuck this exercise, just tuck it away. It's all yours to use. And if you're having a writing day where you are just stuck, 100% stuck on what you're doing, any of these exercises that I'm going to share with you, I think would just help to get you going either on something new or something that you're working on. So for example, I'm going to show you how this could work on a work in progress. Maybe, let me see, off the cuff here. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, I love it. So my work in progress is set in Austin. My first person narrator is a mom in her 40s who's a real estate agent whose career is floundering. And if I were stuck and I was like, I don't know what the heck Sarah is doing today, like I'm so stuck in this scene, then maybe I write the scene from like the girl at the Dairy Queen watching Sarah go get a blizzard, right? Just to like, maybe it's keeping me in my work in progress, but it's also like, it's getting me into another space, putting my character in another space, having them interact with another first person. So, or I might, if I'm stuck and I'm like, oh my gosh, true, like full disclosure, I have not looked at my novel since January because I teach and I'm a mom and I've got other stuff. I'm about to go back to it. Going back to a project when you haven't looked at it in a while is really hard. But I can already see if I was stuck, when I sit down, I could use the line, the last time I saw her, and reference any of the other characters in my novel to help with that. Or the one thing I know for sure, like I think I could start with that. My character doesn't have a truck, so I'd have to really get creative with that. Full moon, maybe. But like one of those, either starting with that sentence starter one or the last one would really help me, I think, to get into my work in progress. If I was stuck, which I tend to be. Full disclosure, totally tend to get stuck. Any other questions or comments that you want to make about the first person point of view before we move on? I think at the very end, like I review everything, and obviously, like I said, you have access to this, but I have really enjoyed having started, I've kind of run the gamut. So I've, my thesis that I never did anything with was first person point of view. It was a disaster for reasons I said, mostly because the story, it was too close to me. My novel that's being repped right now, third person, multiple points of view, I just felt so free. I felt so freed up to write a story in a place that I wanted to write. Yep, Morgan, that's it. Yep. So I went with the third person for this novel because I had this very specific, everything about it was so specific and well known to me. Like Houston in the year 2000, like I can close my eyes and be there. I can be at the high school where I taught, the political climate. I mean, it just everything. And I had some real things that I wanted to say and real people I wanted to like, not real people, but I mean, like experiences that I wanted to like really dive into, but I could not, unless I was going to write a memoir about that time, which I didn't have an interest in. I don't have an interest in really. I was going to have to put some real distance between myself and that story and that book. And that was helped to use the third person tremendously. I had so much freedom. The book that I'm writing right now that's using the first person, easier, yes, Morgan, more fun and available to me because this woman that I'm writing, my main character, is so not me. Really. And like, even like but I'm still offering as the author through this character, I'm offering like my commentary, that's why I said it's like more satirical. Like I'm offering this commentary about Austin and about parenting. But yes, I'm going to Gogi. I can. But this woman is not me. I mean, nobody could look at this and be like, oh, wow, there's Stephanie writing all about, no, not even close. Okay. Let me answer Gogi's question, then I'm going to get to you, Morgan. So first person present versus past. I think it's often more common, and we can look at some works. Let me think about this. And when we work in a second person, let me go back and look. I'm pretty sure I use first person in the past tense. Present is weird. Like present tense, I think, can be really strange. Because it almost feels like too immediately. Like I'm thinking like, I walked down I don't know, Gogi. I'm going to get back to you on that. Let me take some time like at the break. Yeah, right. I think past tense is often better, but I want to just like, as they like to say, put a pin in that and come back to you when when I'm not on the camera and just think and come back with a more articulate answer. So Morgan, if you write under a pseudonym, that gives you a different kind of freedom for sure. And I just think like you want to like know, I think it's helpful for you to know, like, am I writing, if I'm writing in the first person point of view and it's a story that's really close to me, is it possible that like my intention, am I trying to get after like, do I really want to tell a story about something that happened to me and get after a bigger meaning? And then you're probably writing essays or creative nonfiction. But yeah, let's start talking about second person, which is so fun and weird. Okay. Are you all seeing it? You're all seeing what sorry. You're all seeing the second person point of view slide now, I hope. Okay, thanks, Gogi. Great, okay. Okay, so the second person point of view uses you. Much like coveted or loved quote, not coveted, but loved quote by Gandhi that's on bumper stickers and t-shirts. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. And I picked that quote. It is a quote that I like. But also I feel like it sort of encapsulates like what the you, part of what the you is in second person point of view, which is like, as the writer, you are asking the reader to really participate in this world with you. So maybe not be the change, but to be, very intimately involved with the story. And let's talk a little bit about what I mean there. So I think I have yet to I have yet to write something full on or like submitted something for publication that was second person point of view. But I love doing this exercise. It's super fun and freeing. And as the writer, you're creating this you that implicates the reader, right? So you're really, as I said earlier, like you're really engaging them. And I'm thinking even for like, if I was stuck in the novel that I'm writing right now, which is first person point of view, I might just shift and try to write a scene from the second person point of view just to get me out of that rut. But it's not just, doesn't just have to be an exercise. Like there are published works that use the second person point of view. And we'll look at a couple of those and talk about why. It can give weight to a work by suggesting or indicating that this experience is profound, right? So the example, one of the examples that I'm going to share is from Mary Karr's second memoir, Cherry. And she does not write the entire memoir from the second person point of view. In fact, it's just like maybe 2 or 3 places in the whole work. And there contain chapters that are in the second person. But the one that I shared with you all is when she gets called to the principal's office, when she's in middle school, late middle school, maybe early high school. And what I love so much is that I think she's talking about herself. It's a memoir, but she's talking about herself almost like she's hovering over and watching herself in this space. And I think that whole idea that an experience is shared, profound, and connecting, like middle school, early high school is awful. And there's some details that, well, it was for me, maybe not for you, but it was for me. And I think that's what Mary Karr is getting after. Like, this is a time in life where you, like all of us, maybe have experienced some of the thoughts, feelings, like indignities that Mary Karr writes about in that section. And so I like the second person for that. Here are a couple of disadvantages to the second person point of view. It can feel combative or accusatory, right? So if you keep seeing that pronoun, you, you're like, okay, not me, right? Not even a little bit. It's like, this is not my story. Stop imagining that it is, or putting that on me. It can be difficult to pull off for a longer work. So I think I included an excerpt from How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia, which is a full-length work that uses the second person point of view. It's gorgeous. Like, I find that book to be really moving and beautiful, and I cried at the last 2 pages, which, as much as I'm an emotive person, doesn't often happen to me when I'm reading, but I did. So it can happen, but it can be difficult to pull off in a whole full-length work. And it can feel gimmicky because we don't see it very often. And so when we don't see something really often, it can feel like, why is this writer doing this? Why didn't they just use the first person point of view? Let me see this, the chat. Oh, I don't know that. Googie, is it a full-length book? And is it really titled You? That's kind of awesome. Okay, I'm gonna check that out. Yeah, wait a second. Is that the one, have they made it into a series on Netflix or something? Is it now, was it made for television? Because there's a series, I feel like there's, yeah, the book Always, right? But it's a stalker. Oh, okay. I'm going to check that out. I had no idea it was a book first, so I love that you told me that, and I'm going to read it, and it works really well. Can you think of why it worked really well? Like, I'm curious, like what, yeah. So when he is saying you, is he referring to the person that he's stalking? Right. Okay. Oof. Yeah, that's good. The examples that I'm going to share with you, the you, I think is either, well, let's take a look. Let's see if I have them. Whoops. See if I have them here. Okay. So there's Cherry by Mary Karr. So let me do my not so slick movement of like bringing it up. And I'm really, thank you again. I will thank you for your patience as I try to figure this out, because it's, that's not it. I have to pull up. No. Oh, sorry. Okay. Screen sharing has stopped. I'm gonna pull, there's Mary Carr. Okay, and now, I'm gonna share. Okay, you should be seeing this. Oops, you should be seeing Mary Carr now. Are you seeing Mary Carr? Just so I know. Okay, Morgan, thank you. You're wise, make me feel better. Okay, really, they do. Okay, so my question that goes along with this is, okay, what is Mary Carr able to communicate using the second person point of view? What emotions does the passage evoke? Let me, oh, I don't want to, okay. Trying something here. I'm trying to move this. Okay. 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 There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. So your thoughts on this? So when Mary Carr opens this chapter by saying, only when you read a story in your 8th grade English book about a minister who insists on watching the world through a black veil, do you realize that a vague exhaust has come to cast a pall over everything that you see? So I guess when she's using the you, right, she doesn't have another character in mind, unless we want to say like she's the character or that we're the character. Let me jump into this chat and see what we've got going on. Yes, Gogi, 100%, right? And so for me, when I see the way that she does this, and she lets us know too that it's still her. So this is chapter 8, and I do think this is the first time in the entire memoir that she does this. She mentions Leisha, who's her sister. She mentions mother. So she is talking about herself. But like, let me just change it to the first person and let's talk about what we think. So Carr could have very easily said, only when I read a story in my 8th grade English book about a minister who insisted on watching the world through a black veil, did I realize that a vague exhaust had come. So what's the different effect there if we use the first person? Is there a lot of you in dialogue? Right, but it's not, yeah, like if I were to say, how are you? Like, to another character, that's not necessarily using the second person point of view. I'm just using the pronoun to address another character, Pat. So in this section, we see that she's using you in place of I. That's the second person point of view. And why is there a reason? I'm just curious why in a memoir where Carr has used mostly the first person point of view, like why do you think she decided to shift here? Not what I meant to do. Sorry, y'all. I'm gonna, okay. No, Gogi. I think she does 2 others. When you say, tell me more what you mean, Betty Jo. I think she does it. She does do it a couple of other times, but it's mostly in the first person. And I think when I think back, I think the other time she uses it is when she leaves home for good. So when she graduates from high school and she's packing up and heading to California. So I wonder if if I were to study the book, like is she using the second person at these very like sort of like watershed moments where it was like, Gogi says, feels like she's still talking about herself, but is maybe disassociated from herself. She comes outside of the body observing it. Yes, yes. Yeah, I get that, Morgan. And I think Morgan says, you know, where she's saying you starts to, like, it just grates on them. Morgan, we share the trauma with her. Yeah. And yeah, Pat, I think that's it too. And I do think that sometimes with a memoir, right, you might start to feel or worry that you have like that your story ceases to be relevant So the rest of the world, right? You might have that feeling of like you're looking for a universality, right? Because otherwise it's a diary. I mean, when people write a memoir, they have often like some, not always, but like often they feel like they have something significant, and a significant event or occurrence or something unique in their life that's worth sharing. But really it's this idea that like they're seeing their observations of a situation, they feel like they're seeing some universality that they want to share with others. And I think Carr in this place is saying we all, or maybe many of us, have been in this place where we've been in middle school, we felt like we didn't fit in, we had an adult sort of make that very clear or like make us feel less than. And I want you, reader, to live in that space with me very intimately. Let me pull up, I know the next excerpt is How to Be Another Woman. So Lori Moore, this is from Lori Moore's collection, Self-Help. And it's a series of very short stories, many that begin with this how-to. So sort of, tongue-in-cheek self-help, right? Like how to be another woman, not necessarily something, no judgment, but not necessarily a chapter you'd find in a self-help book. So that I sort of answered this first question. What familiar forms does the use of the second person here establish? But that other question about feelings. So let me, like, what feelings is the second person evoking here? Let me pull that up. Okay. So, sorry. Okay. So note that too, like, so the title is on, I mean, it's written up here, obviously, but it's a part of the collection, right? So she really opens this immediately with like a how-to suggestion. You meet in expensive beige raincoats on a pea soupy night, like a detective movie. And then gives like a series of instructions. First, stand in front of Florsheim's 57th Street window, press your face close to the glass, watch, So immediately, like the form is being mimicked of like how to do something, okay? There's very clear directions that are being given. I guess a question I asked is like, what's the feeling that's evoked from this? I'm sort of curious, if you had a chance to read it already. I did not mean to stop sharing, sorry. Oh my gosh. Friends, okay. I wanted to go to the chat, thank you. Yeah, Pat, it is like that. Yeah, an irony, yeah. Great point. So Betty Jo, yes. So there's this irony of like, again, the collection being like self-help, and it is ironic that your self-help would be, how do you figure out how to be the other woman? Perfect. Is this like someone lecturing, you do this, you don't do this, or tell someone to watch what I think? Yes, totally, yes. Pat, that's absolutely what's happening. And yeah, it's instructional. It's like, I'm going to tell you something. But the details, let's look at some of the details here. Okay, some of the details. Like, they're so specific, right? That it's not a bulleted list, that there is a character behind the you here, right? You climb on together, grab adjacent chrome post, and when the bus hisses and rumbles forward, you take out a book, right? So it takes it beyond that, like, I'm going to tell you how to do this, but I'm going to tell it from a very like intimate place because this is something that I've done before. Yeah. And I love it. And I think if the book would be told, the story would be totally different if it was just told in the first person point of view. Here's how I was the other woman. I met him in an expensive beige raincoat. I just think it would be less, there's something lost there. If it's not instructive, she's not telling you how to do this, you're losing, the story would have to be so much more about this affair than it ends up really being. But I think what the story is the fact that like, I'm going to give you directions on how to do this thing that I did. what questions do you have? I did not mean to stop share. I'm sorry that I keep doing that. Friends of mine, let me see. Here we go. Yeah. I wanted to go to chat. What questions or thoughts did you have about that excerpt, if any? I'm going to give you a chance to play around with like the self-help thing, like how to do this, and see what it feels like as a writer. Yeah. Let me go. I want to look at, okay, this is the How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. Let me see the thought here. Yeah, Lee, I can see that. And you're going to have a chance, maybe, because I think I have a couple different prompts. Yeah. And I think, in parts, I love knowing this. And I think, I'm sorry, and I'm reading your comments and I'm like 5 steps ahead in my own head about it. I see what you're saying, that it's distracting. And I wonder too, I'm not defending the piece. I wonder if you read, if you read from beginning to end of the story, how you would feel. Like, would you still feel distracted? And but I think it's important, if the first page is not pulling you in, that's important to know, right? So what I'm hearing you say is like, if it was the first person or third person, you would feel a little bit more drawn in. So what's interesting to me about this excerpt, from How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia, is that he is the author is very open about the form that he's co-opting. Like all books, the self-help book is a co-creative project. This is something I really love because it's so rare that a writer sort of pulls up the blinds and shows like why they're doing what they're doing. And I feel like this writer does that, which is maybe why I cried at the end, because I did feel that, like that thing that Holden Caulfield was talking about, like where you really get to know the writer. Like I did, I felt very intimate and connected to this book. So when he says like all books, the self-help book is a co-creative project. When you watch a TV show or movie, what you see looks like what it physically represents. A man looks like a man with a large bicep looks like a man with a large bicep, goes on. But when you read a book, what you see are black squiggles on pulped wood or dark pixels on a pale screen. And when you imagine, you create. So he has this whole idea of this, that he's developing a reader-writer relationship, and that's what a self-help book does too. And so I guess I want to look at the question I asked here. How does a second person point of view help to establish tone here? Or did you? No, it is not. It's definitely not that, Betty Jo. It is not a parody of Asian stereotypes. So it happens to be, I'm so glad you asked that. So it happens to be, it's set in, if I'm remembering correctly, because it's been a very long time since I've read this, it's set in South India. Has anyone else read the book? It's set in Southern India, and it's a time, it's sort of like, like walking a reader like through the challenges that there are of how to get rich in Southern India, particularly because social status is set for so many, but there is and was, he's writing about like a sort of a tech boom that was happening, and this like development that was happening that was sort of giving people of all backgrounds the opportunity to thrive. But it's in the end a pretty sad book, but not a parody. Like he's certainly not making fun of Indians, South Indians. But thank you for asking that. Yeah. Are there any other thoughts about this selection? I mean, and about like being so upfront with your reader about like, here's what a self-help book does. Here's what, you know, when he says a reader is a co-creator. I'm just curious about your thoughts on that kind of bluntness that a writer might share with the reader, if that's something that is off-putting or does engage you. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I find that it does too, Gogi. I think that, and because I think it's like so, especially because this is like a book length work. So like what Lori Moore does in her collection of self-help is like not all the stories use the second person. And it's just, it's from the title, you know, that she's not parodying, but she's co-opting like this form of self-help books. And then Mary Carr doesn't use the second person throughout, so there's no need to like be so direct. But I think like in this piece, it does make a lot of sense to speak to the reader and to kind of let them know like co-creator, co-conspirator, we're in this together. Okay, I want to look at are you? Oh my goodness. Are you? Okay. 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 So you're seeing, we're back to the PowerPoint now. Okay. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to play around with this and to see what it would feel like. So what would it feel like to begin a story with a how-to title? And I gave some examples: how to disappoint your mother, how to fail out of college, how to stay single, how to embarrass your children. You could do how to anything. But in the time, so it's 8:03 now, so maybe like I'll check back in at around 8:10, give you a chance to play around with this exercise, have people share. I really enjoyed that part when people were willing to share for the first person point of view. Give people the opportunity to share before we move into talking about the third person point of view. Any questions for me before? Did everybody see the slide that says what the prompt is? Just so I know that that's clear to everyone. Okay. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, y'all. Okay. So I'm gonna, again, I will stop the video so that I'm not creeping you out by staring at you, and come back around 8:10. Hi, Lee, I'm excited to see what you have and we can start sharing. First, Lee, before I even read what you wrote, I want to hear from you what it was like to write these sentences. What was it like to write in the second person point of view? I'm curious. Yeah. Did you, okay, so I'm going to read it now. Yeah, I can see that it would have been. You know when it shifts for me, and I'm wondering if this is when it shifted for you. Not that it's good, it's all great. It's the moment when you say, when you write, you can pretend to be invisible and somehow you become just that, invisible, unseen, unnoticed. You find safety in this and power. Something shifts for me there where it's like, as the reader, it makes me think about this differently, right? It makes me think, huh, maybe that, yeah, when I was single for that time, like, was that about power? That definitely was about being safe. Like, right, it gets me thinking about it in a totally new way. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think too, like there's a potential to go further if you wanted with this, but I just want you to know that I feel a shift as soon as I get to that invisible, unseen, unnoticed, and then the line, you find safety in this empowered. That's really good writing and it's really powerful. Anyone else want to share? Or at least, even if you don't want to share, like just talk about, oh, of course. Even to just talk about what it was like to write in the second person. Okay, Gogi, how to get rid of a headache. Let me move okay. I'm just moving this so I can see better. Okay. Take your spouse out for a drive, let the clean air blow over your face, stop at the park and bring your blanket, setting it gently on the grass, invite your partner to lie down beside you. Be sure to choose a spot where you can be alone together, unseen. Let your spouse talk until they fall back, as they always do, and drift to sleep. Whoa! Shocking. Okay. Wow. Okay. I love it. It feels very Gillian Flynn-ish. Nice, creepy, good. Morgan, how to stay single when you are alone in your home. You must commit to being. I didn't know this, Gogi, but now it all makes sense. I'm looking at Morgan's piece now. Don't engage in conversation from the outside. There will be pop-up on your screen. They'll invite you to engage with others. Don't be fooled. This is the first attempt to get you to think about being with another, talking with another, wanting more of another. See, that's when it shifts for me in the line, in the writing. I can feel it. The next step to the trickery is to get you to connect past the click here link, wanting more of you, your words, thoughts, picture, and voice. Don't be lured to speak and become comfortable talking, also known as conversation. I think it's funny. It's like sad and weird and funny. When you attach, you are no longer single. Remember the comfort of being all you in your universe. Don't you want to stay single? It's so good. It's really a great opening, Morgan. And I can see this going further too. Pat, remembering several points will help you survive in college. Wake up in the morning is most important, but just as much you have to go to bed sometime during the night. Don't sit on the front row and let the professor see you yawn. Changing clothes at least weekly is a requirement if you have a roomie. And most important, never show your parents your grade. Otherwise, you're done. It's so good. So fun. So I just want to end by saying, like, with my intention, you know, when you're talking about point of view, you can't not talk about the second person point of view. It exists. Writers are using it. And it's popping up. I mean, that book, there's something I feel, well, Gogi mentioned a super popular book that uses second person in a different way, has a very definite you in mind when they're writing. Oftentimes when writers are using the second person point of view, it's a reflection of a first person point of view. It's a reflection of a character, I, but it's also being used as a way to engage a reader further. So if you are not alone, if the second person does not feel like something that you are going to continue your writing career with. However, I would say that, again, when you get stuck, or if you're having just a bad writing day, or if you just aren't sure what to do with a character, I think writing in the second person point of view for a couple of pages can free you up and can reveal some really awesome writing. So I want to go back to Lee's points, or Lee's line, you find safety in this empower. Like, to me, like Lee, like the first 1, 2, 3, like 4, 5, 6 sentences, right? It's like she was writing towards something and then she got it. You find safety in this empower. To me, I'm like, okay, what is that about, right? Gogi, I mean, it stuns the reader when they get to the end because it's totally not what they're expecting. Morgan, for Morgan, I think it's when Morgan starts using the dashes, being with another, talking with another, wanting more of another. It's like, I think that something as big as you're getting after something big. And with Pat, I think it's like it's funny, but there's this funny but serious tone that's happening. So I think it can just help unlock you. That's what I'll end with, that, with the talking about the second person. That's how I want you to see it, as like something that could potentially like unblock you, let's say. Okay, let's talk about the third person. So this is, there are two iterations of the third person point of view. And I want to start with the third person limited because it's really the most common point of view that we see in fiction. So it's where the writer tells the story through one character using he, she, they, right? The person's name, right? Linda, Bob, whatever, but then is using those pronouns he, she, and they throughout. Most fiction is written in this way. Why you might use it. It tends to be more objective. So the narrator and the character are not one and the same. Do you understand what I'm saying there? So like, so the first person, it's like the reader knows, like, it's not that the reader thinks you are the first, that you're the I, right? Most readers won't make that mistake or assumption, I should say. But it puts one more layer of objectivity between the writer and the reader, if that makes sense. Because the narrator is not the same as the character. But you know, we see the character as some separate entity that's telling us a story, or that we're seeing the story through, I should say. Also, if you read a lot of contemporary fiction, and by contemporary I mean like really in the past, like, I mean, I've been avidly reading fiction on my own, like outside of school for, 20 years now. And it seems like a lot of what's published is this multiple point of view, where every chapter is told from the point of view of a specific character, and then it rotates. So the first novel that I wrote has 4 points of view. And there are 4 main characters, and each character has a chapter, and then it rotates. And they don't all go in order. It's not like A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. I let the story unfold as the story needs to unfold. And so sometimes, so the order changes. But still, many, many, many successful, popular books are told from this point of view. There's this immediacy. The narrator of a third-person novel is a godlike witness to the events, or a movie camera, like recording events as they happen. Not unlike the I point of view, really. I mean, there's a similarity there between the I and the third person in immediacy. But it can give you a sense of freedom that the I might not give you, right? So when using the third person, you can describe a town, a landscape, a family's history, and you could separate the narrator from the viewpoint character, and you're freeing yourself up, right? So like to use the first person point of view, say like, I'm from Wilmington, Delaware, okay? That's my hometown, right? I've never written a book set in Wilmington, but if I did, and I was using the first person point of view, which again, that would be messing with my own rules about not being separate enough from author to story, but just bear with me here. If I'm writing in the first person point of view and I say like, let's say my opening paragraph is, I hadn't been back to Wilmington, Delaware in 20 years, but the death of my father, forced this, unwanted reunion with my family. To then go into a paragraph or 2 or 3 that described all the ways that Wilmington had changed from 20 years ago to the present, the reader would be like, what? Like, I don't think that works with the first person point of view. Because it's like the reader, when they see the first person, they're like, oh, I'm getting this person's story, not the town's history. Right? Those details could come out, like I'm riding in the car with my dad, or no, my dead dad. My dad's not really dead, but I opened by saying I'm going home for his funeral. But I'm saying I'm in the car with my sister. Like if I want to give the reader the indication that like things in Wilmington have changed, I would say to my sister, who's riding in a car with me, like, oh, what didn't Sam's Pizza used to be on the corner? Like, what is this high-end wine bar, right? So I might say it in dialogue, but I'm not going to say to the reader, let me give you a travel log of Wilmington, Delaware. Whereas like if I'm writing a third person and it's like, Stephanie couldn't believe all the changes when she returned home, where Sam's Pizza used to be now sat at a wine bar. Like it frees you up to be able to describe that stuff, where I think a reader is not expecting that when they get a first person point of view. And I would suggest to you to look at books and see if you find what I'm saying to ring true, that like if it's a first person point of view, does the writer incorporate details about family or towns more seamlessly than giving like a page of background information about it? And I think you might notice that that's true. Here are some disadvantages to this point of view. You're sacrificing intimacy, but you make up for it with immediacy. So you're not, the character is not, you're not inviting the reader so intimately into the life, but you are offering an immediate association between the character and the reader. And you are introducing this like other person. And that's very distinct. So that, I mean, it's a disadvantage that, you know, you're getting rid of that intimacy, but you might not, that might not be necessary for the book, depending on the tale that you're writing. Okay. I want to stop. I just want to check in and see if there are any questions about third person limited before I move in and start talking about third person omniscient, which is weird, but also something that we do still see sometimes. So any questions about third person limited? Okay, I'm going to move on and just let me know, you know, you're doing, oh, thanks, Cookie. Yes, so let's talk about some disadvantages. So, oh, I already did that, sorry. Let's talk about, yeah, omniscience. So, with this point of view, the narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of all characters. So this is like the truly godlike position. Like someone is observing a whole town, scene, environment, and they know everything. They know everything about everybody. Right. So the narrator knows everything, so the reader knows everything, right? That is a reason to use it if that is a book that you're telling. And we'll talk about the example that I shared with you, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, that uses omniscience quite a bit throughout the book. Not fully, not exclusively, but a lot. We'll talk about why he does it. So as a writer, you aren't limited to a single character's point of view in a scene. So here's this thing though that happens, like that even with third person omniscient, you don't necessarily want to head hop too much. So if that's a familiar term, if like you've been in your writing group and people are like, you're head hopping, which means like I'm in this person's head and then I'm in that person's head, like that can be really challenging for a reader. So I guess I would recommend, if you are using third person omniscient, that you're very clear very early on that you're doing that the reader understands that that's what you're doing, which is why you might move from one character to another. But head hopping can be really confusing for readers. So there's some disadvantages of this point of view. It can create distance between the reader and the characters. So I'm going to look at the chat that's coming up. Hold on a second, the comment. Yeah, how do you tell readers that, Pat? So that's a great question. And I think maybe when we look, let me think about it. And when we look at the example that I have to talk with you about, let me see if the example helps me to get clear on how you would do that. Morgan, right. So, and I think that's why third person omniscient is not something that we see very often, quite honestly. And in the excerpts that I'm showing you from, yes, Amanda, I do. I want to talk about, let me pause that for, does Harry Potter use omniscient, Gogi? I'm so ashamed because I didn't read it. I'm a terrible person because I didn't read the Harry Potter books. It's weird, just weird timing in my life that I didn't read them. And now I know, and now I have kids, and like my husband reads them and to them, and my kids are, I know. It's weird. I don't know. I know. I think it's third person. Is it? Oh, maybe Pretty Little Liars, maybe. Okay. I need to think about that, about what's omniscient. Let me go back. Okay, so Morgan, okay, let me start with the excerpt that we're gonna look at. In Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, most of that book is told from a limited point of view, Billy Lynn. However, there are times when the author, Ben Fountain, sort of comes out, like literally, I keep doing this motion because it's like literally like, it's like he pans out. So it's like you're with Billy, and then he's like, zoop. But here's the whole scene. And it's pretty clear. I hope it's clear in the excerpts because I teach that book for one of the classes I teach at Texas State. And so it feels very clear to me that like, it's obvious that that's what he's doing. That sometimes you're really close with Billy, but then Fountain, the author, lets you know, like, now we're going to look at this whole cast of characters. And so, right, Morgan. So if you really want the reader, and no, let's talk about it from a writing point of view. If as a writer, you really want to tell a story and you want multiple people telling that story, then I think you're best doing third person limited, chapter to chapter to chapter. Do I see a preference for a certain point of view depending on genre? Yes, Amanda. So I think first person point of view seems really common with young adult fiction, with a lot of women's fiction, what they used to call reference as like chick lit, which is not a necessarily like, I mean, it has a derogatory connotation, I want to say. So I think like the first person, so when we think about women's fiction, book club fiction, less derogatory, I think, they're also using this term, right? Thank you, Gogi, very much so. There's this term that's being used right now that I really actually like. I'm going to type it just so that it's here. Upmarket women's fiction. Upmarket women's fiction. And I think it's a way to tell editors, agents, writers that women's fiction, that women are book buyers, that they like reading books that have a strong first person narrator. I think a lot of upmarket women's fiction is written with a strong woman narrator that's told in the first person. So Amanda, YA women's fiction, upmarket women's fiction. When I think about what we call hi Stephanie, literary fiction. I don't know why I felt like I wanted to type that, but I did. When I think a lot of third person. I think a lot of third person limited. I think a lot of, but yeah, like I'm just thinking like, because I read a lot of literary fiction and I feel like, I won't say 9 times out of 10, I'll say 8 times out of 10, it's written from the third person limited point of view. And oftentimes with multiple narrators. Yeah. And I don't know when it comes to like, and maybe Gogi, I'm wondering, are you reading a lot of thrillers right now? And is there a point of view that you're noticing in the thriller genre? Or mystery? It seems like when I think about mystery, I feel like it can go, I feel like it usually goes third person limited, where it's like you're following the detective or the journalist or the police officer. Ton of French, yeah, third limited, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's it, like third limited is, and so Amanda too, I will say, and I think I say this, yeah, I think I say this at the end of the class, I almost said the show, it's my YouTube channel. at the end of the class, I think I say like, study your genre, right? So whatever it is that you're writing, like read widely, pay attention to point of view. And it's not to say that you, obviously, Gogi mentioned You, which is a thriller told in the second person point of view. I also just read Andrew Sean Greer's book. I cannot think of the title now. It won the Pulitzer. Why can't I think of it? Sorry, I cannot think of it, the title, but it's kind of this weird hybrid of like the third person, limited and omniscient. It's kind of weird in that it's omniscient. But it's omniscient in the, like, it's like another, it's like you have this like idea that somebody, what the heck is that book called? Sorry, because it's the character's name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Les, yes, Pat, did you read it? That is it, Les. Yes. So do you know what I mean, Pat, when I say it's like third person, you're in Les's head, but there's this sort of like, it's like you're watching him. You're watching him. You're not necessarily, you're with him, but you're more like observing, like yeah. And then there's that twist at the end. We won't share it with everybody in case they read it, but there is an actual watcher or somebody who's actually telling us the story, who's not Les and is not omniscient, but for much of the book, you get this omniscience. And Gogi, I think you're totally good with a literary thriller, a market fiction that's first person past tense. I think that's a great call. Which goes to this point, like read your genre, know your genre, and study the point of view and think about why that person made that choice. How does the point of view fit the story? And then see if those answers to the question help you when you are, as you're considering your own point of view. Okay. Disadvantages of third person omniscient. There's this distance between the reader and the character. And I don't know. And again, like, I think it was Pat who's read less, like, there's something I won't give it away. And I think it's a book that's worth reading, but I do think that at the end, there's a little bit of you realize as a reader, there's been a little bit of a gimmick. There's a little bit of a trick that's been played on you with the omniscience. And it's a little, I don't know. It's a little weird to me. And so it took me out of the narrative. Like, and so when I think about that book, rather than just thinking about this like story, Arthur Less, I think it's Arthur, whose journey I've been on, like, I think like, oh, that ending, like the way that the writer did that, like, they say like it disrupts the dream to some extent. So that's how I felt. It could lead to more telling than showing because you don't have you don't have a specific character. If you're like looking at all the characters, you don't have one character. And so you're having to like tell a lot about what's going on as opposed to just showing what's going on. Okay. I did have, let me look, I want to look at time. Okay, I have a couple of examples that I wanted to share, and let me see if I can pull them up. I mean, I know I can, but okay. Okay. So you're seeing, so this is Mary Helen Speck's Migratory Animals, which is a novel that came out, 5 years ago, maybe. Mary Helen Speck is a Austin writer. She teaches at St. Ed's. She's a dear friend. This book is beautiful. It's told from multiple characters' points of view. And so the question I wanted to ask, how does the point of view give a sense of character and place here? And so, okay. Yeah. So in the beginning, we see it's very clear that Flannery is the character. And when, it's funny to me that like the opening line is like what Flannery first noticed when she arrived in Nigeria, because and I know Mary Helen, this is likely not 100% intentional, but it works well for my class where it's like, I'm wanting you to see, here is this character, Flannery. We're told right away that we're going to see things through her eyes. Let me look at my question one more time. How does the point of view give a sense of character and place? So I sort of answered the first part by saying, like, she, you know, we know who Flannery is. Is there anything else, if you read this excerpt before we came in here together, was there anything else that you noticed about the fact that it was from Flannery's point of view? I mean, I think that first line, because it's her, because it's Flannery, like you know, you're getting the sense, like, she says it was like walking off the airplane into a land of giants. She's an outsider. We know this immediately, like she's an outsider in Nigeria. I don't know. I don't know what more I have to say, unless, I mean, what else you all might have to say about her. We know, and we get the sense of like her relationship with Kun Lee very early on. And it's interesting too to think, like, I mean, she is one of the main characters. The story is not entirely set in Nigeria at all. But it's important that the story is told from her point of view and not Kun Lee's point of view. And if it was his point of view, how different that might be as a Nigerian man with this American woman coming into his country. Like, what might his observations of her be that would be so different than hers of his? Okay, here's the piece from Billy Lynn. And this, I guess I really do, let me look at my question when it comes to Billy Lynn. Okay, so the question I have here is, how does Ben Fountain, the writer, help us to see into other characters' thoughts? How does he do that? So maybe, can you take just a couple of minutes to read this excerpt again and see if we can talk that through a little bit? Because I do think there's omniscience here that I want to discuss, but I want to see what you see. So again, the question, read through the excerpt and tell us, be able to talk about how Fountain gives insights to more than one character. Yeah. So the first thing I notice when I look at this excerpt is that Fountain starts with they. They are huge. They could be a new species or throwbacks to some lost prehistoric age when humans the size of Clydesdales roamed the earth, right? So immediately as a reader, I'm like, who is seeing they, right? Through which lens, what character is observing these people? I'm going to take a look at the right. So as Morgan says, we're interpreting the character's actions and choices, and you get this guy whose nickname is Abort. Aren't you glad you aren't that guy's toilet seat? So you get his observation, but he's not the only one there. He whispers that to Billy. And then when I go down, you get dime. So if you're looking at 173, then there's this bit of dialogue. I wonder if Pat Tillman played with any of these guys. Dime muses in a bright voice. And that says, so there's Dime staking out his psychic territory. And then there's these two guys who are doing this. So there's this big, like, already you've got three, well, you've got two. You've got Abort and Dime, whose thoughts you're getting. Then it gets back into like a more limited point of view where he says all the gear, all this stuff depresses Billy further, such tedium it involves. So there's Billy. There's another part in the book that I didn't, maybe I should give you some background about the novel too, to talk about. So the whole book, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, takes place in the Cowboy Stadium on Thanksgiving, all in one day. There's one chapter that is told in the past, but most of it, 99% of the book is told in this one day, and it's in Cowboy Stadium. And so for a lot of the novel, Ben Fountain, the writer, he's sticking with Billy, and we're seeing Billy and these guys, these other fellow soldiers who he's there with throughout the game. But there are also moments where Ben Fountain is commenting very explicitly on the other fans, on Norm, who's like a character that's based off of Jerry Jones, and making judgments, making observations about him that are not Billy Lynn's observations or judgments. And so he's using the third person omniscient at times to be able to give the reader this bigger sense of this place and the people that are in this place. So let me close this and go back to, because I think current site. Okay. The prompt that I want to give you a chance to choose from is either writing in the third person limited or writing in third person omniscient. And so for third person limited, I offered, very similar to the first person exercise, wanted to give you a chance to choose a character, and there's some backstory, and begin begin a scene where you're using their name and you're writing from the third person. So we have Arthur, who's a high school math teacher, always wanted to be a photographer. Jane, a young mother living at home with her parents. Lucas, I guess I was really tied to the idea of a mail carrier. Lucas, a mailman finishing his last route before retiring. Lauren, a second-year med student. So if you were to build a scene using the third person point of view, I've given you a character and a little bit of a backstory and an opportunity to start a scene and play around with writing the third person. Here's what I do for omniscience, which is different, but kind of goes from what I learned from reading Ben Fountain's book. So if you wanted to try to write in the third person omniscient point of view, you would describe a scene where there would be a crowd, a concert, a carnival, the grocery store on a Saturday morning, and take a more authorial position. And I keep doing this with my hand because that's how I see it. It's like somebody who's like taken the roof off of the HEB and is looking in on all these people. And you're describing that place. What would it feel like to write about the group as a collective, like about all of the shoppers, about all of the carnival goers, about all of the people at the concert? And if you feel like it, you could break the narration and zoom in on one character like Ben Fountain did with Abort and Dime, right? But really giving your reader this survey of the land, if that makes sense. So choices here, either taking the next 10 minutes or so to write in the third person limited point of view with these characters and backstories, or whatever you like, or whatever feels good, or if it's your work in progress to do that. And then maybe thinking about the third person omniscient point of view. So let me give you an example of what I might try, even just as an exercise. Like I said, I don't think this would ever necessarily make it into my novel, but I'm all for like writing stuff that's not going to make it into your novel or story, because we have to get through a lot of writing. I don't even want to say bad writing, but you write a lot that doesn't make it in the page, but all the writing is instructive, right? So my current novel, as I said, is a woman who is a the imagining that the real estate market in Austin eventually crashes. And so she is no longer making the kind of income that she was making from selling real estate. And also imagining that marijuana is legalized in the state of Texas. And she meets a client, the very last client that she's working on selling a house to, has just relocated from Oklahoma, where marijuana has been legal for a while. Again, fictional. But this woman has started or is involved with a multi-level marketing, think like Herbalife or Amway. It's like basically a pyramid scheme for selling cannabis-related products. This woman and her husband moves from Oklahoma to Texas, relocates. She's starting up her business here. My main character, because she's at a loss for how she's going to make any money, gets involved with this multi-level marketing cannabis product scheme. Now, I think it would be really fun for me to write a third-person omniscient point of view scene of what does a big conference for this company that my character works for look like. So, and I'm doing this, like, what if I were to peel the roof off of the Austin Convention Center, where this company is coming together to have their national Salesforce extravaganza weekend? What do I see when I open that up? And I could zoom in on my main character at times, or I could zoom in on the character who gets her involved in this. But I'm also just like looking at like, what's the crowd wearing? What are they doing? What song is playing in the back? What is the speaker saying? Like, and do that from this third person omniscient point of view to give me the opportunity to sort of like really see the whole scene from the outside looking in. Okay. I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I'm sorry for that, but I want to give you, let's say 10 minutes to try either of these. I'm going to go back to this slide, which might be the one that just has the more instructions on it that you might want to look at. But know that you could also write third person omniscient looking in on a crowd. I'll come back at 9, and I'd love to hear and see some shares. So let me get myself out of here, and I'll see you in 10. Hi. I am wondering if anyone has anything that they want to share. If you're still working, that's great. I'm just looking at time and wanting to be sure that we have plenty of time for questions. So thank you, Betty Jo. See what we've got here. Yes. Love it. Love this. And it almost like Betty Jo, I'm curious how it felt to write in this way. I mean, it almost felt, there's definitely like this communal sense that definitely comes through, that if it was just like one character, we might not have that same feeling. I love it. Yes, Betty Jo, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. And looking at Pat's too, I really like the details here. There's also like, it almost feels like, so there's Lauren and let me see, Lauren and Jane. And then when the third-year student comes in, I assume it's male for some reason, maybe because she calls them jackass, but it seems like setting up some tension between Lauren and that other person. So I love it. Who else? Anybody else want to share what they have? And maybe even just talk about, like, so now you've written, if you have, I mean, you've been given the chance to write in all 3 points of view. Is there one that you preferred, an exercise tonight that you preferred, that you want to talk about? Or did something surprise you tonight when you were writing? Lee, I'm looking at yours now too. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that last line, Lee, I just love it. Oh, it feels like you can just feel that desperation that he has. I love it. I love it. I love it, Lee. I'm glad that Betty Jo, I think, so the third person you're probably not going to see in your memoir, but in the second person, like you might read Cherry by Mary Carr. I'll type it here just so it's here. And take a look at where she uses the second person, Betty Jo, and then, decide if there's place in your memoir where you might use that. There's another memoir I want to share here. This is of a dear friend and former student, someone I was in the graduate program with. Melissa Stevenson wrote a book called Driven, and it's written from the first person point of view mostly. It's about her and growing up in Indiana, but also it's really about her brother's suicide. And so there are places where I think she uses the second person point of view in between chapters as she's like imagining what her brother's last day was like. And I think she uses you there. So it just might be interesting as you're writing a memoir. That might be another one that's really great to look at in terms of thinking about form and structure and deviating from first person. Pat, I'm glad that you liked seconds. Lee, I really like the first person point of view. It's much easier to write in. I can enjoy the third, both limited and omniscient. I think most of the time I write what you write for fun is omniscient. Yeah. Morgan, I want to see your excerpt. There was nothing extraordinary. I love it. I love it. That always remained unlocked for him. Who else would want to sneak in after dark? Lucas noticed each back entrance seemed to all look in duplicate to each other. Yeah, and what I love about this, Morgan, is like you're so like, this is only Lucas could share these details with us in this way. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, I mean, it's just so specific to him and his point of view and his experience, and we get that so quickly in those few sentences. That's what I figured. Yeah, I imagined that, Morgan. I could, yeah, but yeah, excellent. Excellent. I want to look at I want to go back to our PowerPoint, just because I think it provides, make sure. Okay. Okay. We did this piece. Okay. So when you're thinking about which point of view is going to be best for your work, I want you to first ask yourself, does the structure of the story, and I say force, that's a little harsh, but does the structure of your story inform you into a particular choice, right? So I'll I will speak to Ben Fountain's work and why I think he uses omniscience. That book, Billy Lynn's On Halftime Walk, so much of it, and the reason why, frankly, I don't think it made a very good movie, is that so much of that book is social commentary. So much of that book is about the, so much of the book is about football and American politics and the military, right? And so I think in order to tell that story in the way that he wanted to tell it, and he wasn't, wanting to use like cultural essays, he had to tell it by using omniscience at times. If you have multiple characters who have equal weight in the story that you're telling, and it's important that everybody hears from them, third person limited, switching chapters from person to person is probably a good call for you. If you're writing a young adult novel, there's this, I teach secondary language arts pedagogy classes for people who want to go in and teach middle and high school English. And there is this theory that there are these stages of literary appreciation. And in this, it's really interesting to me because the first person point of view and that idea of immediacy or intimacy sizes up perfectly with what readers between the ages of, 11 and 15 or 16 are really looking for. They have a hard time, any of us who remember what it was like to be a teenager or have raised teenagers or spent time around teenagers, like it is their world and we're all just living in it, right? And so the first person point of view really suits that genre and those stories well, because a teenager, those are the stories teenagers want to read. Those are how teenagers tell stories. It's all about them. So thinking about, does the structure of the story, does the genre force you in a particular choice? Also to think about what's more important, like the plot, character arcs, or are they of equal importance, right? So like if the plot is really important, then I think that's like third person limited often suits like a very plot heavy novel. I'm not saying it's exclusive, but if the character study, if it's like this one character that you really want somebody to know and their arc is such a big part of the story, then I think the first person point of view is more often used. How emotionally close do you want the reader to be to your main character? And if it's very close, if it's someone that you really want them to sort of cozy up with and know super intimately, then the first person point of view is probably a good one to go with. And I think a lot of us know, like when we start writing, I mean, for example, like when I started writing this second novel, like I just felt like, yeah, like I wanted you, the reader, to want to sit for 250, 300 pages with my character. Like I wanted her to be, I wanted you to get to know her. That was as important to me as the plot of the book, because I felt like she has a very distinct perspective on the world and I want you to live with that and her. So the first person seemed to make sense. Okay, so that was the last question that I had. And I want to go back now to the chat, okay, and see what questions you all have. Okay. Hold on a second, sorry. So Pat, I see, I didn't mean to, hold on. I can leave the PowerPoint up and still pull up your chat. Okay. I like to write dialogue from several people. Should this be more omniscient? Can we switch limited to omniscient? So Pat, if that's something that you can have dialogue from multiple characters, absolutely. It's the head hopping, it's the thought reading is where you have to start asking yourself if you need to employ some omniscience, or do you need to have every chapter be like belong to a different character? Because unless you're writing in through omniscience, it's really hard to have to have exposed two characters' thoughts in one scene, unless it's very clearly being done because it's omniscience. And to confuse things even further, you can show someone's thoughts and internal workings through their actions, through their dialogue, you know, so it's like, I think sometimes we want, you know, it's like, well, Mary was thinking about having pizza for dinner, but Bob really wanted but Bob was thinking about how much he wanted fried chicken. Well, you can write that in dialogue. You can say, like, Mary said, how about we get pizza for dinner tonight? Bob shrugged his shoulders. I really wanted chicken. Like, so instead of if Bob thought, Mary thought, you're putting it in dialogue. Does that make sense? Like, oftentimes when we talk about head hopping and we talk about worrying about like point of view and head hopping, it's like, well, don't have the characters just be thinking all the time. Like, you can have your limit, you know, if you do third person limited, that we can see and understand that character's thoughts. That doesn't mean that we don't ever know what's going on with another character, but they can show us that through dialogue or their actions. I don't know if that mucked things up or cleared up anything, Pat, but that's just what I was thinking. Okay. Other thoughts, questions, comments? Yes. Okay. So this, I did not do the looking that I said I was going to do about tense, but if you all give me a second. No, you're good. Yes, let me take a look. Okay. I'm going to pull something up for myself that I don't think that you all are going to see, which is fine. I mean, I'm not trying to be, I just want to look at this book that I'm working on, the book I'm writing. Hold on. So let me take a look. Because it's weird. Like I mean, I want to say the past tense is just more often done. But I need to I want to see how I'm working it in this book and be able to talk about it more clearly. Okay. No, so you know what? Okay, so let me talk about tense because, and I wonder this way, like so the book, let me get back into chat. The book that I'm writing right now, I have in present tense. I'm using first person, present tense. And I guess and I have a very clear, like, well, I don't know if it's clear, but like my book starts at the beginning of a school year. It's probably going to end at the end of the school year, to be honest. So I have a really clear timeline that's pretty short. I mean, this is not an epic, right? It's kind of a fixed time, and it's very contemporary. So I guess my thoughts in using like the present point of view were about that. This character is not looking back on anything. It's like, it's all about what's happening right now. So I guess, I don't know, is there a tense that, no, Morgan, there's not. There's not. Though no. I mean, no, there are no hard and fast rules, but I also do, I think, I mean, it's interesting to think about. So my first book that's out with an agent right now, is third person, limited, multiple points of view, past tense. The book is set in the year 2000. So there's no, there's no hard and fast rule, but I can also say, like, I'm pretty sure that's why I chose the past tense, because the events are very clearly, and that the time, that time is very important. Like the fact that it's not set today, but that it is set in the past matters quite a bit to the work, because it's situated like historically in that time and place for a reason. Yeah. So no. And I'm thinking about the second person. I don't think there's no hard and fast rules, no. What other questions? These are good ones. Yeah, I agree. It does seem so frantic and so in the moment. And so I think like that's why I had to double check. And I think I've had a hard time. I don't know that my book, I mean, I'm pretty sure my book will stay in the present tense. And again, because it's like, it's so clearly like it's happening. I mean, it's not happening today, but I mean, it's so contemporary. And in fact, I mean, one might say like, I mean, one would say like, because I've legalized marijuana in the state of Texas in my book, it is clearly not of this time, but like of an eventual time, right? It's an imagined future time. So the present tense makes sense for those reasons. But yeah. And again, like I think Amanda had asked earlier about, you know, if points of view go with different genres, which I think like, look at the books that you're reading right now. One of the most helpful things to me as a writer has been to imagine, even before my book is, even in the very early days of writing my book, and I would say early, like by the time I get to the first, let's say 50 pages, and this is arbitrary, but I'm just kind of thinking about my own process. I want to have some books in mind that my book is in conversation with, or that my book would be on a shelf with, or that somebody who read book X might pick up my book, right? And then I want to look at that book. And I want to think about it, and I want to, when I get stuck, I want to look at it. So my first book, there's a beautiful multiple point of view book called Plainsong by Kent Harif, and it is just gorgeous. And it came out actually maybe in like 2000. And it's just beautiful. It's a really lovely book. And it's so characters are really important in that book, but it's all third person limited. And so that was my like, yes, that is what they would call comp titles. Yes, Amanda. And so for me, like Plainsong was my comp title for my book. And then there's a book that came out more recently than Plainsong called Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of a Fist by Sunil Yapa. And that's a more contemporary book that is sort of in conversation with my book. Social issue, set in a very specific place and time, being told by multiple characters, story being told by multiple characters. And so then when it comes to things like point of view and structure and tense, look at your comp titles, to use the term that Amanda's brought to the table. Look at them and see what those writers have done. And again, it's not to say you're copying them, or you're like, oh crap, so-and-so used the present tense first person, I should be doing that too. No, but like, look at what they did and why they did it, and then look at your own book and say, okay, are the choices that I made serving me, or should I be looking more to do it in this way? Because I think, I mean, in writing, there aren't hard and fast rules. But what there are books that have been on the that have been published and are sitting on shelves. And so it's good for us to look at what's come before and not mimic them, but directly or you know, profoundly, but also to be like, to understand why and how that writer made those choices and how that's gotten that book up on the shelf, if that makes sense. Yes, I'm happy to do that. And Haley's here too. And I don't know if Haley can send them out to the participants, or I can have Michael do it. I'm happy to share them. Yes, I have enjoyed it too. This is one of my favorite workshops because I feel like every time that I teach it, I learn something, or I think about things in a different way, or I'm reminded just how important these choices are and how freeing they can be once we try something new out. Yeah. And I guess I hope that that you learned something tonight that you can take back to your work and progress. But yeah, good. Yeah, Michael will send out the recording. So then you should have the slides, though. I apologize if my manipulation of the media was not awesome. I'm going to work on it for the next time, work on it more. Good, Morgan. I love knowing that. But yeah, and please, reach out to me, reach out to the Writers League. I too, great, Amanda. I'm so glad. It's so nice to see you here. I'm glad. I love that. And if you're in the Austin area, absolutely 100%. All of the events that Haley mentioned at the beginning are awesome. And I know that Agents and Editors Conference is end of June, early July. It's a place where I met my agents. It's an incredible resource. It's great that it's right here in Austin. I 100%, you may not be in a place with your work where the Agents and Editors Conference makes sense to you now, but just if it does, I would invest in that time for yourself and your work. It's really great. It's a great conference. So Haley, anything else that I need to be thinking about or doing? I know we're coming up to time. I feel like if we don't have any more questions, I don't have any more answers. Awesome. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. I did too. And I hope, not all classes, some of you might have taken other classes with the Writers League, and I know that you'll have the opportunity to give feedback on the class. Please do. I love teaching and I love getting feedback, and not all Writers League classes have their students write. It's something I like to do because I feel like as a student, that's really helpful to me. But please, in your comments, you can, let me know if that's not working for you, and I can think about that, and know that not all instructors do that. Everybody has their own way of conveying the information and making the classes meaningful. So, all right, I'm gonna sign off to everyone. Good night from Las Vegas. How cool, Morgan. Oh, desert nights. We're it's hot and humid and pollen-y here in Austin. So the dry desert air sounds really wonderful right now. But happy writing to you all. And thank you so much for being here tonight. And take care. Bye-bye.